Hey everyone, David C. Anderson here coming at you from the Knife Center. Welcome to Knife AQ number 48, the knife series where I answer all your questions, whether they're sharp or dull. This week, I'm talking about Boy Scout knives, what makes D2 D2, and what's the best angle to sharpen your blades at, and a few other things as well. Let's get into it. All right, everyone, thank you very much for putting your questions in the comments section of these videos so that we have a good pool of really compelling, really good stuff to answer for the series. If you want a chance to have one of your questions featured, just leave them in the comments section below, and we'll do the same thing, comb through them for a future installment. First question today comes from Chicken Drumstick, or I guess Chicken Drumstick, depending on your spelling.
Sounds delicious either way.
Either way, yeah. It's almost lunchtime here, can you tell? Hey DCA, I recently joined Boy Scouts and I need a good scouting knife. Either a Victorinox style multi-tool that does not have a corkscrew, can't stand those things, or a fixed blade around 3 to 4 inches, preferably with micarta handles and a leather sheath. Thank you. Cool, I love this one because it lets me talk about one thing, kind of a common misconception out there. Contrary to popular belief, fixed blades aren't specifically verboten in scouting troops. At least there's nothing at a national level in terms of a regulation governing fixed blades or the style of knives. But all of that does get decided at a troop level. So if your troop allows it and a fixed blade is a-okay, awesome, love it. But sometimes also you have to watch out with the certain scout affiliated campgrounds you go to. Sometimes they'll have their own regulations as well. I can tell you all this because I went through all of this when I was in Boy Scouts myself as well, and had to kind of be under some pretty strict restrictions. In my troop, we couldn't even have a locking blade on our folder, which is kind of silly when you think about it, but say no more. So for that reason, I'm going to pick something that would have worked in my scout troop back in the day. And one of the things you're going to want in your Swiss Army knife for a scout especially is a nice wood saw. And the Victorinox Farmer has long been a great choice for kind of outdoor uses that a scout might encounter. But I think the newer Farmer X, with the addition of the pair of scissors, makes an even more compelling option. And the price on these guys right now comes in about 60 bucks. So not cheap, but pretty attainable as well. Already right there, you've got a great set of tools. The scissors is great for the smaller stuff, first aid kit stuff, that sort of thing. Very nice. The saw works exceptionally well for something this size. You even get a nice crisp spine if you were gonna do something like carry a fire steel. For that type of fire starting, that'll work as a striker very nicely. Then you got, of course, the standard things that's almost on every Swiss Army knife this size. You got your cap lifter / screwdriver and your can opener / screwdriver. Can opener was maybe a little more important back in the day when I was in Scouts. Nowadays, a lot of canned food comes with a little pull tab, so you don't need this as much, but still nice to have. And then, of course, nicely sized main blade, simple stainless steel on these guys, of course, and a nice awl, which is going to work great for some of the merit badges out there. You might be taking like leather working, basket weaving, that sort of thing. Nice little tool to have. Nice little scraping edge on that guy as well. And then the handles, being the Alox aluminum, definitely more durable than the red plastic scales, the Celador scales that you would get on many other Swiss Army knives. So the durability there is going to see you through your scouting days, and in all honesty, probably lasts a lifetime as well. Now, if you can have a slightly bigger and or locking Swiss Army knife, go big, go real big. Go for the Ranger Grip 78. Now, something like the one-hand Trekker is a very popular model. This one's a little bit larger than that, and the reason I picked this one over that Trekker is you have a completely plain edge blade here. You don't have partial serrations out near the tip, which I think is a little more versatile and a little longer lasting as well, because when those serrations do eventually go dull, they're going to be harder to sharpen than your plain edge. You got plenty of length here. You've got a locking blade. You depress the shield here on the front, and that essentially pushes this liner lock out of the way. You can see it right there. Rest of the tools, you don't have a pair of scissors on this guy, unfortunately, but you have a bigger wood saw, which is very nice, and then the can opener and cap lifter, and the toothpick and tweezers, which you don't get in the Celador scales, or sorry, which you don't get in the Alox scales. But speaking of scales, you've also got some rubbery grip sections on here to give yourself a little bit extra. So both of those are really good options. I will say though, don't completely discount the corkscrew, especially for a scouting scenario or a camping scenario. I have found them to be quite useful for a lot of things other than opening wine. In fact, I've never opened a bottle of wine with one. If you've ever tried to untie a really tight knot, especially in paracord, corkscrew is really handy. So just keep that in mind. And for your fixed blade, Mora comes to mind, like the Pro or Basic series with the sub 4-inch blade. Always a pretty good choice. But I don't actually typically like to recommend Scandies for scouts, just because the way scouts are taught here in the States, sharpening Scandies is kind of not in most people's repertoire. But they're a good option if you don't want to spend a whole lot of money. If you can spend a little bit of money, take a look at the Lion Steel B35. It's about 130 bucks right now. 3.5-inch blade. We've got a Sleipner steel, full flat grind. So it's going to sharpen conventionally on your standard stones, and you've got a good overall profile for slicing and kind of bushcrafty camping tasks, and a micarta handle like you requested. Kind of slim. It's not an overly bulky handle. It's going to carry very easily. You've got olive wood or G10 also available, and the sheath on this guy, as requested, is leather, and they are really nicely done. Almost clicks into place because they've molded it so nicely. And then you've got that retention strap on the front as well. So not a big scary fixed blade, which is nice for this sort of thing. If you want a little more length or you want to go for an extra girthy handle, the B40 is also a good option. But I think this right here sits at a really nice sweet spot. All right, next question comes from Ninjanobi. Is there any premium steel, as in CPM 3V or similar fixed blade knives, around a 4-inch blade length that is not going to break the bank? Yes. Well, first of all, some of those Lion Steels right in that category, but also this guy. You mentioned 3V specifically. This is the Benchmade Puko, the Benchmade 200, and you've got a 3V steel blade, 3 3/4 of an inch, and it's about $128 right now. Again, not a cheap knife, but a pretty attainable, or a fairly attainable price, I should say, for a lot of people. You've got an overmolded handle on a full-length tang. Very nice shape to those handles. Fills the hand very nicely. And of course, you've got the shock absorption from that if you're going to use this for like batoning, smaller things, of course. Or if you're going to use this in cold weather and you need to take your gloves off and hold the knife, at least you're not holding any bare steel on the blade. Really nicely done. This would actually make a pretty decent option, I think, for our Boy Scout friend here earlier, if you're willing to overlook the lack of micarta on this particular guy. But doesn't have a Scandi grind like a traditional Puko might. You've got a more conventional saber grind, mid-height with a flat geometry. It's going to work pretty well for a wide variety of things. And you've got a leather sheath here as well. A little bit more in the feature department than the Lion Steel. You don't have a retention strap, but it does sit lower. You've also got a removable dangler here at the back, so you can carry it a few different ways, and even a nice fire steel loop on the side. Very, very cool knives, I think, and very attainable for some American-made 3V fixed blades. All right, the next question comes from Tim Long, who says, DCA, my knife has rust on the blade. What is the best way to care for my knives while in storage? What are some good oil options, and what is a best practice for maintenance and keeping my collection in tip-top shape? Love the channel, sir. Thanks, Timbo. Thank you, Timbo. So basically, once you've got your blade cleaned up, the rust off of it, however, don't know how deep it is, but once you've got it in that stage or any of your other knives ready to store away, just a little bit of light surface protectant in the form of oil. I could make a recommendation. I do like mineral oil, but it could be anything. Just give it a good wipe down with something like that. Keep your fingerprints off of it. Something like tough cloth is going to work pretty well as well. The kind of protective layer that can give when you go to store something. That's step one. Step two, if you've got a leather sheath, don't store the knife in the sheath because the contact of the leather on the knife can cause some corrosion issues with some of the metal fittings, especially if you've got like brass pins in a handle. But even some of the steels out there and even some of the handle materials, especially if there's some stain on the inside of the sheath itself. I've got a beechwood handled Nessmuck that I stored in the sheath for a little while, and it's got a little ring right where it was right at the top of the sheath, unfortunately. You live and learn. The third thing you can do, especially if you're storing things in a pretty enclosed space, is look into some kind of desiccant. You can save those little packets up from your electronics purchases, but you can even buy stuff that you can keep in a drawer with your stuff, and you can even recharge it even in a microwave or plugging it in, and that can help kind of keep some of the moisture drawn away from your blades and towards the desiccant. So hope that helps. All right, next question comes from James Harris. Why is D2 so difficult to sharpen? Basically, so I'll pick up a knife here. This is a CJRB Crag that we used earlier this week in our Cardboard Slayers video. And D2 is a conventionally formed steel. You've got various elements kind of melted together, and it has very large and very hard carbides when you get down to the microscopic level. And that's kind of what makes it a little bit harder to sharpen. You've got really big chunks of very hard material, but it also is what makes it work really well with a slightly toothy edge on stuff like cardboard, and it is what gives it a very long-lasting edge as well. The size of them isn't so much related to the long-lasting nature of them, I don't think. It's more with that slightly toothiness or slightly toothy character you can get with it. But if you want kind of some of those characteristics of D2, but you're not a fan of how hard it is to sharpen, look to the powder metallurgy process. And there is a CPM version of D2, and you see it on this particular Kershaw leak, for example. Fairly affordable for a steel like that. American made, just under $100 right now for this particular one. It's still got those very hard carbides, but because of the powder process, they're much more uniform, they're much smaller as well. So that really does change the character of it, especially during the sharpening phase. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of insight to why D2 is what it is. I mean, when we get into things like, this is some of the real into the weeds stuff about literally microscopic cross sections on steels. They are going to perform and feel a little bit differently than certain other steels. You may never notice a difference, but when you really get into the nitty gritty, there can be some differences that you really can feel when you actually cut, which is pretty cool when you get to that point. It feels pretty good when you can really tell the difference. All right, next question comes from Jeremy Page. What is the quote-unquote best sharpening angle for an EDC knife, and how much does steel type factor in? I'm considering changing a knife from factory edge of 25 to 20 or 17 to be more slicey, but I'm worried to make the edge too delicate. All right, in terms of quote-unquote best for EDC, it does depend on what type of tasks you regularly are putting your knife towards. But for just kind of general, we'll say light to maybe medium use EDC types of tasks, I can kind of approach the angle or a question from that angle. But I do have to ask though, what factory edge is coming in at 25 degrees per side? That's pretty thick. I mean, you might see something like that on some axe grinds out there, possibly. But 20 degrees is pretty much a benchmark. That's kind of the place to start. And it works really well across a wide variety of steels, but you can certainly go thinner. I actually tend to put my knives somewhere around 17 to 18 degrees. I'm freehanding a little bit, but I kind of know where my angles are, and it usually tends to work pretty well. But this is an area where steel type does come into play, and this works well with the last question we just looked at. Usually something with big carbides like D2, they're gonna have a harder time with thinner edges. You want something with a really fine grain structure in order to more successfully take that thinner edge. Things with good toughness as well, that's gonna impact it. And that's an interesting thing where toughness can actually increase or essentially make your knife hold an edge longer if you're able to have it take a thinner edge and hold up to it without rolling or chipping. It's gonna feel sharper than a steel that might be a little more chip prone if it were that thin, so you have to thicken it up. As to being worried about trying it, I say go for it. Because the worst thing that is going to happen if you thin it out too much and you get a few little microchips or rolls and it's just not holding up to the task, you just come back in with your 20 degrees per side. That edge itself is going to thicken back up just a little bit, and then the shoulders behind it are going to be even thinner. So it might be a little bit of the best of both worlds type of scenario. So hopefully that gives you some guidance into to what you're looking for, and I hope that helps. All right, next up, if you were waiting for a David and Seth segment this week, we're actually not going to have it on this video because we're actually going to have a standalone episode next week of just me and Seth answering a question. So we're kind of pulling that out. We're breaking it out into its own little series, hopefully. We'll see how it goes, and hopefully you guys enjoy it. But in the meantime, we're now going to get into the lightning round for today. Cruz Reyes asks, DCA, what's your favorite ugly knife? I like the question. My Gen 3 Delica. It's a great knife. Is it pretty? No. No, it is not. Especially now that we're so used to seeing like a Gen 4 Delica, that this Gen 3 just looks a bit older. But man, it's capable. Man, it works. You can see I've carried and used this a lot. You got a reversible pocket clip, old school texturing on the handles. It's not before they did the bi-directional stuff. Hollow grind, hollow saber grind here, not a full flat grind. But it just works, man. I like it a lot. I like it a lot. Anyway, next question, Jesse Mitchell says, you call out certain knives as being poor man's Sebenzas. What about the Boker Bonfire being a poor man's Peña front flipper? It is an amazing value. So we got Peña right here. Excellent, excellent knife. Bonfire. Yes, that's me agreeing with your statement. I believe I did mention that, I think, when these were in a new knives video. If I didn't, I was definitely thinking it. But these are pretty cool. They're about 67 bucks, D2, 3.5 inches. Obviously, this is not the same Peña pattern, but he does have one very similar to this. And yeah, absolutely, man. Deserves a shout out, so I put your question in there. All right, next up, Rob Nelson. In your opinion, would the hollow saber grind on the Schrade SCHF-1, that's one of those hollow-handled survival knives, hold up better or worse when chopping than the full flat grind of the Rat 7? In general, hollow grinds are not for chopping. Your edge is just too thin, typically, to really excel at that type of task. So I would look somewhere else for your chopping needs than anything with a hollow grind. In this case, the Rat 7 is going to win. All right, finally, the most serious question of the day to close things out, from Mark Dodson. I truly enjoy watching your videos. They are very informative and helpful. I'm very glad for that. I have to say, though, every time I read anything about knives now, I hear DCA's voice narrating the dialogue to me. Should I seek professional help, or is this normal?
Yeah, both.
It is normal?
And get help.
And get help? Sure.
Not a doctor.
Not a doctor. Sit, Ubu, sit. Wait, wrong thing. Anyway, that's it for today. Thanks everyone for your questions. Make sure to leave them below. For our future episodes, we'll pick out some good ones. If you want to get your hands on any of these knives, except for my Gen 3 Delica, of course, we'll leave links in the description to take you over to KnifeCenter.com. We'll link to the new Delicas anyway. And while you're over there, make sure you sign up for our Knife Rewards program. So when you put your money down on one of these knives today, you can earn some free money to spend on your next one. I'm David C. Anderson from the Knife Center, signing off. See you next time.